Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Trust. Travis White stood at his office window on the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a chessboard waiting for his next move. At 45, he had built White Industries from nothing into a construction empire worth hundreds of millions. His calloused hands, remnants of his days swinging hammers on job sites, now signed contracts that shaped skylines across 3 states. Those same hands had once gently cradled his newborn daughter Emma 16 years ago, promising her a world where she would never want for anything. His wife Christina had been radiant that day, her auburn hair catching the hospital light as she smiled down at their child. They had been a family then, or so he had believed. Travis had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he aged out at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and an unshakable determination to never be helpless again. He'd learned early that people would betray you the moment it served their interests, but he'd made an exception for Christina and Emma. They were supposed to be different. They were supposed to be his sanctuary. Christina White had married Travis when he was just a struggling contractor with big dreams and bigger debts. She'd been a real estate agent then, ambitious and sharp-tongued, drawn to his raw determination and the fire in his eyes when he talked about building something lasting. For 15 years, she'd played the perfect wife, hosting dinner parties for potential clients, managing their social calendar, ensuring their home was a showcase worthy of Travis's growing reputation. But Christina had grown restless as Travis's empire expanded. He worked 18-hour days, missed family dinners, and when he was home, his mind was still at construction sites and board meetings. She'd found herself managing a mansion instead of a marriage, raising Emma largely alone while Travis conquered his professional world. That restlessness had led her to Chad Sexton 18 months ago. Chad was everything Travis wasn't: charming, present, and completely focused on her when they were together. He was a commercial pilot for a private airline, tall and lean with silver threading his temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He'd swept into her life during a chance meeting at the country club, all easy smiles and undivided attention. Christina told herself she deserved happiness. She'd stood by Travis through the lean years, had earned the right to feel alive again. The affair began with coffee meetings that became lunch dates, then weekend getaways when Travis was traveling for business. Chad made her feel young and desired in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Emma White was 16 and sharp as her father's business instincts. She'd inherited Travis's observational skills and Christina's intuition, a combination that made little escape her notice. She'd been watching her mother's behavior change over the past months. The secretive phone calls, the new clothes, the way Christina would disappear for hours claiming to be shopping or visiting friends. Emma adored her father, perhaps because she understood him in ways Christina never had. She saw how Travis had built everything from nothing, how he'd given them a life of luxury and security. She also saw how lonely he was, how he worked himself to exhaustion trying to provide for them. The idea that her mother was betraying him made Emma's blood boil with a rage that surprised her with its intensity. 3 weeks ago, Emma had finally confirmed her suspicions when she'd seen Christina kissing a man in the parking garage of the Meridian Hotel. She'd followed her mother there, and what she'd witnessed had shattered any remaining innocence about adult relationships. Her mother wasn't just having an affair, she was planning to leave Travis. Emma had heard enough of their conversation to understand that Chad was pressuring Christina to file for divorce, to take half of everything Travis had built and start fresh with him. They talked about Travis like he was an obstacle to be removed, not a husband and father whose life they were destroying. That night, Emma had gone to her room and carefully installed a small camera she'd ordered online, hiding it behind a decorative picture frame that faced her bed. She'd spent the weekend at her friend's house, but she'd given her mother a key to her room months ago when Christina had started redecorating. She suspected her mother was using her room for phone calls with Chad when Travis was home, thinking it was the one place he'd never intrude. Emma's plan was simple: gather evidence, confront her mother, and give her a chance to end things quietly before Travis ever found out. She still hoped, with the naive optimism of youth, that her family could be saved. She never imagined that her mother and Chad would discover the camera. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Travis was in his home office reviewing blueprints for a new commercial complex when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. Hospital calls never brought good news. Mr. White, this is Dr. Mitchell at St. Mary's Emergency. Your daughter Emma has been in an accident. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of red lights and screaming sirens in his wake. Travis's mind couldn't process the words severe head trauma and critical condition. Emma was supposed to be at a sleepover at her friend Myra Brown's house. How had she ended up falling down the stairs at their own home? Christina was already at the hospital when he arrived, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking as she gripped a cup of cold coffee. She'd found Emma at the bottom of their main staircase, she explained between sobs. Emma must have been sleepwalking again, something she'd done as a child but hadn't done in years. I heard the crash and ran out. Christina whispered, her voice hollow. She was just lying there, Travis. So still. There was so much blood. Dr. Mitchell was a gray-haired man with kind eyes who delivered devastating news with practiced gentleness. Emma's skull had been fractured in the fall. There was significant swelling in her brain. They'd induced a coma to give her the best chance of recovery, but her chances were uncertain at best. Travis stood over his daughter's hospital bed, tubes and wires snaking across her small form like technological vines. Emma looked impossibly fragile against the white sheets, her face pale except for the dark bruises blooming around her eyes. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only thing confirming she was still fighting. The fall was too severe, Dr. Mitchell said quietly. There's little chance she'll wake up. Christina sobbed harder, gripping Travis's arm. But Travis felt something different than grief settling in his chest. A cold, calculating fury that he recognized from his business dealings. Something was wrong. Emma was many things, but clumsy wasn't one of them. She'd danced ballet for 8 years and had the grace and spatial awareness of someone who knew her body intimately. As he held Emma's small hand, Travis felt something foreign in her palm. A piece of paper, folded small and pressed tight against her skin. He palmed it without letting Christina see, and later, in the bathroom, he unfolded her careful handwriting. Dad, if anything happens to me, then check the CCTV camera I put in my room. Behind the frame with the sunset picture. Password is your birthday. I love you. Emma. Travis read the note 3 times before the implications truly hit him. Emma hadn't fallen down the stairs sleepwalking. She'd discovered something, documented it, and someone had tried to silence her. The drive home from the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Travis's life. Christina had stayed behind, claiming she couldn't bear to leave Emma's side. But Travis needed answers, and his daughter had left him a roadmap to find them. Emma's room looked exactly as it always did. Neat, organized. Her ballet trophies lined up on the bookshelf and her desk clear except for homework folders and a framed photo of the 3 of them from last Christmas. Travis found the sunset picture easily enough, and the camera hidden behind it was no bigger than his thumb. The footage began 3 weeks earlier, and Travis fast-forwarded through hours of empty room until movement caught his eye. Christina entering Emma's room with her phone pressed to her ear, settling onto Emma's bed with the familiar ease of someone who'd done this many times before. I can't keep doing this, Chad. Christina's voice was clear through the camera's microphone. Travis is getting suspicious. Last night he asked why I was gone so long at the grocery store. Chad's voice was tinny through the phone speaker, but audible. Just a few more weeks, baby. My lawyer says if you file citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment, you'll get half of everything. Maybe more, considering how much he travels. What about Emma? She's been asking questions. She's a kid. Kids adapt. She'll understand when she's older that you deserve to be happy. Travis felt his world tilt as he watched his wife plot his destruction from their daughter's bedroom, treating their 16-year marriage like a business transaction to be dissolved for maximum profit. But the worst was yet to come. The footage from 5 days ago showed Christina entering the room in tears, Chad's voice harsh and urgent through the phone. She knows, Christina. Your daughter knows about us. What do you mean she knows? I saw her at the Meridian yesterday, watching us. She took pictures, Christina. Pictures of us kissing. Travis watched his wife's face crumble. Oh God. Oh God, what do we do? You need to handle this. Tonight. Before she tells Travis. Handle this how? She's my daughter, Chad. She's also the only thing standing between us and a new life together. Think about it, Christina. If she tells Travis what she saw, he'll divorce you for adultery. You'll get nothing. Nothing. Is that what you want? Travis's hands were shaking as he fast-forwarded to the night of Emma's accident. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. Emma entered her room and went straight to the hidden camera, her young face set with determination. Dad, if you're watching this, then something happened to me. Mom and Chad know I found out about them. I heard them on the phone tonight. Chad said I need to be handled before I ruin everything. I'm scared, but I needed you to know the truth. Don't let them get away with this. I love you. Emma had been reaching behind the frame, presumably to retrieve the camera, when the door to her room burst open. Christina stood in the doorway with Chad behind her, both of their faces twisted with an urgency that made Travis's blood run cold. Emma, honey, we need to talk, Christina said, her voice artificially calm. Get away from me. Emma backed toward her window, her eyes darting between her mother and the man she'd only seen from a distance. I know what you're planning. Chad stepped forward, his pilot's uniform still crisp despite the late hour. Your mother and I care about each other, Emma. This doesn't have to be complicated. You're destroying my family. Emma's voice was steady despite her fear. I won't let you. You're 16, Chad's voice hardened. You don't get to make decisions about adult relationships. The next few minutes happened so quickly that Travis had to replay them twice to understand the sequence. Emma had lunged for her phone. Chad had grabbed her wrist, and in the struggle that followed, Christina had shoved her daughter hard enough to send her stumbling backward. Emma's head struck the corner of her dresser with a sound that made Travis physically ill. She'd crumpled to the floor, blood immediately pooling beneath her auburn hair. Oh my God, Christina whispered, kneeling beside Emma's motionless form. Oh my God, what did we do? Chad was already moving, his pilot's training kicking in as he checked Emma's pulse and breathing. She's alive, but barely. We need to call an ambulance. They'll ask questions. The police will get involved. So we give them a story that makes sense. Chad's voice was cold, calculating. She was sleepwalking. She fell down the stairs. You heard the crash and found her. Simple. Travis watched in horror as Chad lifted his unconscious daughter, carrying her out of frame toward the staircase. Christina followed, clutching Emma's phone and the small lamp that had been knocked over in the struggle. 23 minutes later, Christina's call to 911 would report that she'd found her daughter at the bottom of the stairs after what appeared to be a sleepwalking incident. Travis sat in Emma's room until dawn, watching the footage over and over, each viewing adding new layers to his rage. They hadn't just betrayed him, they'd tried to murder his daughter to cover their tracks. And if Emma didn't wake up, they might have succeeded. The note trembled in his hands as he read Emma's final message again. Don't let them get away with this. He wouldn't. Travis White had built an empire by understanding that loyalty was the only currency that mattered, and betrayal was the only sin that could never be forgiven. Christina and Chad had just declared war on the wrong man. Chapter 3. The Mask Falls. Travis returned to the hospital with the camera hidden in his jacket pocket and murder in his heart. But 25 years of building a business empire had taught him the value of patience and planning. Rage was a tool to be controlled, not indulged, and revenge was a dish that required precise preparation. Christina was asleep in the chair beside Emma's bed when he arrived, her face peaceful in a way that made Travis want to wrap his hands around her throat. Instead, he settled into the other chair and began planning her destruction with the same methodical approach he used for hostile takeovers. Dr. Mitchell appeared during morning rounds with news that Emma's condition had stabilized overnight. The swelling in her brain was decreasing, and her vital signs were stronger. There was hope, tentative, fragile hope, that she might wake up. How long before we know for sure? Travis asked, his voice carefully neutral. Could be days, could be weeks. The brain heals on its own timeline. Christina stirred at the sound of voices, blinking awake with the disoriented confusion of someone operating on too little sleep and too much guilt. Any change? She asked, reaching for Emma's hand with what would have looked like maternal concern to anyone who hadn't watched her help cover up an assault on their daughter. She's fighting, Travis said, his eyes never leaving Christina's face. She's stronger than people give her credit for. Something flickered in Christina's expression. Fear, maybe guilt, but she recovered quickly. She gets that from you, she said softly. Your determination. Travis nodded, filing away her micro-expressions for later analysis. Christina had always been a decent actress, but she'd never had to perform under this level of scrutiny before. He was beginning to see the cracks in her facade. "I need to handle some business calls," Travis said, standing. "Will you stay with her?" "Of course. I'm not leaving her side." Travis kissed Christina's forehead, tasting the lies on her skin. "I know you won't, sweetheart. You're such a good mother." He spent the morning in the hospital cafeteria, making calls that had nothing to do with construction projects. The first was to Stuart Leach, a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage and had helped Travis navigate several delicate business situations over the years. "I need everything you can find on a man named Chad Sexton," Travis said without preamble. "Pilot, probably works for one of the private airlines. I want financial records, employment history, personal relationships, parking tickets, everything." "How deep do you want me to go?" "Deeper than he's ever been excavated." "And Stuart?" "This is personal, not business. Bill it to my private account and keep it off all company records." The second call was to Nathaniel Roach, a lawyer who handled Travis's more questionable business dealings, the contracts that danced on the edge of legality, the negotiations that required creative interpretations of regulations. If anyone could help Travis navigate the legal complexities of what he was planning, it was Nathaniel. "I may need some unusual legal advice in the coming weeks," Travis said. "The kind that requires attorney-client privilege and absolute discretion." "How unusual?" "The kind that might involve evidence of attempted murder and conspiracy." There was a pause. "Travis, what have you gotten yourself into?" "Nothing I didn't earn." "Can I count on you?" "You know you can. But be careful. Whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with the consequences." Travis almost laughed. The consequences had already been decided the moment Chad Sexton laid hands on his daughter. Now it was just a matter of engineering the delivery. The third call was to Ron Shannon, who managed security for several of Travis's construction sites. Ron was an ex-military man with flexible morals and skills that extended well beyond checking IDs and monitoring cameras. "I need surveillance on 2 targets," Travis said. "Comprehensive coverage. I want to know where they go, who they talk to, what they eat for breakfast." "Can you handle that quietly?" "Define quietly." "The kind of quiet that never existed." "Ghost protocol." "When do you need this to start?" "Yesterday." By the time Travis returned to Emma's room, he had set 3 different investigations in motion and established the foundation for whatever justice he would ultimately deliver. Christina looked up when he entered, her smile so perfectly crafted that it might have fooled him if he hadn't already seen her true face. "Emma squeezed my hand while you were gone," Christina said, her voice bright with what sounded like genuine hope. "Just for a second, but I felt it." Travis moved to Emma's other side and took her hand, feeling for any sign of response. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, so faint he might have imagined it, Emma's fingers pressed against his palm. "She knows I'm here," Travis whispered, his voice thick with emotion that had nothing to do with performance. "She loves you so much," Christina said. "You're her hero." Travis met his wife's eyes across their daughter's bed. "I hope I can live up to that." That evening, Travis suggested Christina go home to shower and get some real sleep. She protested, but he insisted, promising to call if there was any change in Emma's condition. "You've been here for 36 hours straight," he said, stroking her hair with gentle fingers that wanted to tear it out by the roots. "You're exhausted. Emma needs you strong." Christina finally agreed, kissing Emma's forehead and then Travis's cheek before gathering her purse. "Promise you'll call if anything changes." "I promise." Travis waited until he was certain Christina had left the building before making his 4th call of the day. This one was to Grant George, who owned the private security company that provided protection for Travis's family during high-profile business negotiations. Grant had resources that existed in the gray areas between legal and illegal, and his loyalty was absolute. "I need a favor," Travis said. "The kind that requires complete deniability." "What kind of favor?" "I need to know if my wife is meeting with someone tonight. And if she is, I need documentation. Surveillance. Comprehensive. Video, audio, everything." And Grant, "If anyone asks, this conversation never happened." "Understood. I'll have someone in position within the hour." Travis spent the night beside Emma's bed, holding her hand and watching for any sign of consciousness while his phone buzzed with updates from his various operatives. Stewart's preliminary report on Chad Sexton revealed a pattern of relationships with married women, each ending when the woman either reconciled with her husband or divorced and moved on. Christina wasn't his first adultery target, and she likely wouldn't be his last. Grant's surveillance team confirmed that Christina had indeed met Chad at a motel 30 minutes after leaving the hospital. The audio recordings revealed a conversation that turned Travis's blood to ice water. "How is she?" Chad's voice was tense, worried. "The same. Travis thinks she might wake up, but the doctors aren't sure. If she wakes up and remembers what happened, she won't remember. Head injuries cause memory loss all the time. Even if she does remember, it's our word against the confused teenagers. And if she doesn't wake up?" There was a long pause before Christina answered. "Then our problem solves itself." Travis closed his eyes and counted to 10, then 20, then 50. Emma stirred in her sleep, and he opened his eyes to find her looking at him with confused but aware brown eyes. His eyes. "Dad." Emma's voice was barely a whisper, scratchy from the breathing tube that had been removed that morning. "I'm here, sweetheart. Don't try to talk too much. I remember. Mom and that man, they hurt me." Travis leaned closer, his voice soft but urgent. "Emma, listen to me carefully. You were in an accident. You fell down the stairs while sleepwalking. That's what the doctors think happened, and that's what everyone believes. Do you understand?" Emma's eyes sharpened despite her weakness. "You saw the camera. I saw everything. And I need you to trust me now more than you've ever trusted anyone. Can you do that?" Emma nodded slightly. "You don't remember anything about that night except going to bed in your room. You woke up here in the hospital. Everything else is gone. Can you do that for me? Are you going to make them pay?" Travis smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuine. "Emma, sweetheart, they have no idea what they've started. But I need you to be patient and let me handle this my way. Can you do that? Will they hurt you too? No one is ever going to hurt this family again. I promise you that." Travis called Dr. Mitchell to report Emma's awakening, then called Christina with the good news. Her relief sounded genuine, but Travis now understood that Christina was a better actress than he'd ever given her credit for. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Christina said. "Take your time. She's tired and confused, but she's going to be okay." As Travis waited for his wife to arrive and perform her relief and joy for the medical staff, he thought about the conversation he'd overheard between Christina and Chad. They'd heard his daughter and then callously discussed the possibility of her death as a convenient solution to their problem. Travis White had spent his entire adult life building something lasting and meaningful. He'd created an empire, provided for his family, and believed he was building a legacy that would outlast him. But Christina and Chad had shown him that the only thing that truly lasted was consequences. They wanted to destroy his family for their own selfish desires? Fine. But they had chosen to wage war against a man who had started with nothing and conquered everything in his path. They had gravely miscalculated their opponent. Emma squeezed his hand again, and Travis squeezed back, a silent promise passing between them. Justice was coming. It would be methodical, thorough, and absolutely final. Chapter 4. Gathering Intelligence. 2 weeks after Emma's awakening, Travis had assembled enough intelligence on Chad Sexton to destroy him 3 times over. Stuart Leach had proven his worth once again, delivering a comprehensive dossier that painted a picture of a man with expensive tastes and flexible ethics. Chad Sexton was 42 years old, divorced twice, and currently employed by Elite Air Services, a private airline that catered to wealthy clients who valued discretion over cost. His pilot's license was current, but his financial situation was precarious. 2 alimony payments, a gambling habit he thought he'd hidden, and a lifestyle that exceeded his income by roughly 40% annually. More interesting were his relationships. Chad had a pattern of targeting married women with wealthy husbands, though none of his previous affairs had progressed to the point of attempted murder. Christina represented a significant escalation in his criminal behavior, which suggested desperation. Travis studied the surveillance photos Grant's team had taken over the past 2 weeks. Chad and Christina met 3 times a week at different locations, always during hours when Travis was supposed to be at work. Their body language in the photos told a story of increasing tension. Chad was pushing Christina to file for divorce immediately, while Christina was reluctant to move too quickly with Emma's recovery still uncertain. The audio recordings from their motel meetings revealed the depth of their panic. Emma's memory of the night she was injured remained spotty, a combination of her actual head trauma in her father's coaching. But Chad was paranoid that she might remember more details, and he was pressuring Christina to find ways to monitor what Emma said to doctors and police. Travis had a particular recording that he'd listened to dozens of times, each replay adding fuel to the fire burning in his chest. Maybe we should have finished it at the hospital. Chad's voice was cold, clinical. Made it look like complications from her injuries. She's my daughter. Christina's voice was weak, horrified. She's a problem that's going to ruin both our lives if we don't handle it. I can't. I won't. Then you'd better hope she never remembers what really happened that night. Travis had made copies of every recording, every photograph, every piece of evidence Stewart and Grant had collected. But he wasn't planning to turn them over to the police. The legal system would give Chad and Christina lawyers, plea bargains, and the possibility of reduced sentences. Justice through the courts would be incomplete and unsatisfying. Travis White believed in permanent solutions to permanent problems. Emma was recovering faster than the doctors had expected, though she still suffered from headaches and fatigue. She'd returned to school part-time, and to the outside world, the White family appeared to be healing from a tragic accident. Emma played her part perfectly, never mentioning the camera or revealing her recovered memories of that night. But in private moments with her father, Emma's eyes burned with the same cold fury that Travis recognized in his own mirror. She was his daughter in more ways than genetics. She understood that some betrayals demanded absolute retribution. "What's the plan, Dad?" Emma asked one evening when Christina was at her book club, actually meeting Chad at the Riverside Motel, according to Grant's surveillance team. "Patience," Travis said, reviewing a construction contract that had nothing to do with his real focus. "Your mother and Chad think they're safe because you don't remember and I don't suspect. Let them get comfortable with that lie. And then they're going to learn that actions have consequences." Travis had been careful to maintain his normal routines, attending business meetings and social functions with Christina at his side. To anyone watching, he was a devoted husband supporting his wife through their daughter's recovery. He brought Christina flowers, took her to dinner at expensive restaurants, and listened with apparent sympathy as she shared her fears about Emma's long-term health. The performance was exhausting, but necessary. Travis needed Christina and Chad to believe their secret was safe, that their hastily constructed cover story had fooled everyone who mattered. Only when they were completely comfortable would they make the mistakes that would allow him to destroy them properly. 3 weeks into his investigation, Travis received the break he'd been waiting for. Stewart discovered that Chad had applied for a loan against his pilot's license and aircraft certification, using them as collateral for a high-risk investment scheme. The loan was due in 6 weeks, and Chad's financial situation made repayment unlikely without a significant influx of cash. The timeline explained Chad's increasing pressure on Christina to expedite the divorce. He wasn't just in love, he was financially desperate, and half of Travis's assets represented his only escape from bankruptcy and professional ruin. Travis smiled as he read Stewart's report. Desperation made people sloppy, and sloppy people made fatal errors in judgment. The next phase of Travis's plan required Nathaniel Roach's legal expertise. They met at Nathaniel's office on a Saturday morning, when the building was empty and their conversation couldn't be overheard or recorded. "I need to understand the legal implications of justified retaliation," Travis said without preamble. Nathaniel leaned back in his leather chair, his expression carefully neutral. "In what context?" "Hypothetically, if someone attempted to murder a man's child to cover up adultery, what legal protections would that man have if he chose to handle the situation personally rather than through the courts?" "Travis, tell me you're not planning something that will land you in prison." "I'm planning something that will ensure justice is served. Whether that lands me in prison depends on how carefully I plan it." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, weighing his professional obligations against his friendship with Travis. "Hypothetically," he said finally, "any response would need to be proportional to the threat. Self-defense or defense of family extends to protection against future harm, but it has limits." "What kind of limits?" "The kind that distinguish between justice and revenge in the eyes of the law." Travis nodded. "And if evidence of the original crime was obtained illegally? Then it would be inadmissible in court, but it could still guide someone's understanding of what threats they faced." "I see. Travis, whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it. Not just legally, but morally." Once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them. Travis thought of Emma lying motionless in the hospital bed, of the sound her head had made striking the dresser, of Christina and Chad calmly discussing whether to murder her to solve their problem. Those lines were crossed the night they hurt my daughter, Travis said. I'm just deciding how far past them I'm willing to go to balance the scales. That evening, Travis sat in his home office ostensibly reviewing quarterly reports while actually planning the systematic destruction of two people who had made the mistake of thinking Travis White was a man who would forgive and forget. Christina was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming softly as she moved around the room. To anyone watching, she was a devoted wife and mother recovering from a family trauma. But Travis now saw the performance for what it was, an elaborate lie designed to cover unspeakable crimes. Emma appeared in his doorway, her color better than it had been since the accident, but her eyes still holding the shadows of someone who had seen too much too young. "Mom's making your favorite," Emma said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "She's a good cook. She's a good actress too." Travis looked up from his papers, meeting his daughter's knowing gaze. "Yes, she is. When are you going to stop pretending you don't know?" "When the time is right." "And when will that be?" Travis smiled, and this time there was nothing warm or paternal about it. "Soon, sweetheart. Very soon." Chapter 5. The Web Titans. Travis had learned patience in the foster system, where those who acted rashly were quickly broken by a system designed to grind down the weak. That patience had served him well in business, allowing him to outmaneuver competitors who moved too quickly or revealed their intentions too early. Now it would serve him in orchestrating the perfect downfall of his wife and her lover. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Grant George's surveillance team had been tracking Chad's movements for 3 weeks when they discovered something interesting. Chad was meeting with a man named Jake McCarty every Tuesday morning at a diner downtown. McCarty was a loan shark with connections to organized crime families in 3 states. Stewart's follow-up investigation revealed that Chad owed McCarty $180,000 from a poker game that had gone very wrong 6 months earlier. The debt was accumulating interest at a rate that would have been criminal if McCarty were the type of man who cared about such legal niceties. Chad had been making minimum payments, but McCarty was losing patience. Travis smiled as he read the surveillance report. Chad wasn't just financially desperate. He was in debt to dangerous people who didn't accept excuses or negotiate payment plans. The timeline for Christina's divorce had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. Armed with this knowledge, Travis began to tighten the web he'd been weaving around his targets. Phase 1 involved eliminating Chad's income. Elite Air Services prided itself on discretion and reputation. Their wealthy clients paid premium rates for the assurance that their travel arrangements would remain private and their pilots would be beyond reproach. A pilot with gambling debts to organized crime figures would be a liability they couldn't afford. Travis made a single phone call to Milton Brown, who owned a competing private airline and had been trying to poach Elite Air's client base for years. Travis had provided construction services for Milton's company headquarters and knew him well enough to ask for favors. "I have some concerning information about one of your competitors' pilots," Travis said during their lunch meeting at the country club. "The kind of information that might interest their insurance company and client base." Travis shared carefully edited portions of Stewart's intelligence on Chad, focusing on the gambling debts and criminal associations while omitting any mention of the affair or Emma's assault. Within 48 hours, Elite Air Services had terminated Chad's employment after their insurance carrier refused to continue coverage. Phase 2 targeted Christina's social standing and support network. Christina's affair had been conducted carefully, but not perfectly. Stewart had documented several occasions when she'd been seen with Chad in public, including lunch dates at restaurants frequented by their social circle. Travis began a subtle campaign of social warfare, planting seeds of suspicion and gossip with surgical precision. A carefully worded comment to Alicia Sullivan, whose husband golfed with Travis and whose wife lunched with Christina weekly. A concerned observation shared with Dr. Roach's wife at the hospital charity gala. Questions disguised as worried husband talking to mutual friends about Christina's recent mood changes and unexplained absences. Travis never directly accused Christina of adultery. Instead, he played the role of a concerned husband who was worried about his wife's behavior following their daughter's accident. The rumors and speculation that followed were entirely generated by their social circle's own imagination and love of scandal. Within 2 weeks, Christina was fielding uncomfortable questions from friends about her friendship with a mysterious man several people claimed to have seen her with. She began staying home more often, canceling social engagements, and growing increasingly paranoid about being watched. Phase 3 was more direct. Travis began testing Christina's loyalty and honesty with carefully orchestrated scenarios. He told Christina he was planning a romantic weekend getaway to celebrate Emma's recovery, then had Grant's team follow her when she inevitably met Chad to discuss how to handle Travis's sudden attention to their marriage. The audio recordings from that meeting revealed that Chad was growing increasingly unhinged as his life collapsed around him. "This is your fault." Chad's voice was harsh, accusatory. "You were supposed to handle the Emma situation quietly. Instead, she's recovering and talking to people. Now your husband is suddenly playing the devoted spouse, and my career is destroyed. I couldn't kill my own daughter." Christina's voice was defensive, tearful. "You didn't have to kill her. You just had to make sure she wouldn't remember." A pillow over her face for a few seconds while she was unconscious would have caused brain damage without leaving evidence. "You're insane. I'm practical. And now we're both going to pay for your sentimentality." Travis had to stop the recording at that point, his hands shaking with rage. Chad had wanted Christina to suffocate Emma in her hospital bed to ensure permanent brain damage. The casual evil of the suggestion was breathtaking. That night, Travis looked at his sleeping daughter and made a decision that went beyond justice or revenge. Some people forfeited their right to exist the moment they chose to prey on children. Chad Sexton had crossed that line, and Christina had enabled him. The final phase of Travis's plan would require more direct action. Ron Shannon had the military training and moral flexibility to handle what Travis needed done. They met at a construction site after hours, surrounded by the skeleton framework of what would become a luxury hotel. "I need you to understand something," Travis said, his voice carrying across the empty concrete space. "Everything I'm about to tell you never happened. We never had this conversation, and you never knew any of these details." Ron nodded. He'd heard similar disclaimers before. "I have a problem that needs to be solved permanently. 2 problems, actually. People who tried to murder my daughter and are planning to destroy my family." Travis explained the situation in detail, sharing selected audio recordings and photographs that documented the affair, the assault on Emma, and Chad's escalating desperation. Ron listened without comment, his face revealing nothing. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Ron asked when Travis finished. "I'm asking you to help me ensure that people who prey on children face appropriate consequences." "And those consequences would be?" Travis met Ron's eyes steadily. "The kind that ensure they never threaten anyone's family again." Ron was quiet for a long moment, considering. "This isn't business, Travis. This is personal. Personal jobs carry different risks and different prices. I understand. And I'm prepared to pay whatever price is necessary, including the possibility that this could destroy your life if it goes wrong." Travis thought of Emma's note hidden in her palm, of the sound of her head striking the dresser, of Chad discussing brain damage like a business strategy. "My life was already destroyed the night they hurt my daughter," Travis said. "Now I'm just deciding how many people go down with it." Ron nodded slowly. "Give me 48 hours to plan this properly." "And Travis? After this is done, we never speak of it again." "Not ever." "Understood." Travis drove home through empty streets, his decision made and his course set. Tomorrow he would start being the devoted husband again, playing his role perfectly while the trap he'd built slowly closed around Christina and Chad. They destroyed his family for money and convenience, treating his daughter's life as an acceptable casualty in their selfish games. Now they would learn that Travis White was not a man who accepted casualties in his family. He was a man who eliminated threats permanently and without mercy. Justice was coming, and it would be absolute. Chapter 6. Point of No Return. The confrontation Travis had been orchestrating finally came to a head on a cold Thursday evening in November. Christina had been growing increasingly agitated as her social circle continued buzzing with rumors about her mysterious absences and strange behavior. Chad's unemployment had made him desperate and reckless, pushing Christina to take bigger risks in their relationship. Travis had spent weeks positioning the pieces of his plan, and now it was time to force his opponent's hands. He arrived home earlier than usual, timing his entrance to coincide with one of Christina's scheduled phone calls with Chad. He found her in Emma's room, just as he'd expected, sitting on Emma's bed with her phone pressed to her ear. "I have to go," Christina said quickly when she heard Travis's footsteps in the hallway. "We'll talk tomorrow." She ended the call and turned to face him with a guilty smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're home early." "I missed my family," Travis said, his voice carrying just enough suspicion to make Christina nervous. "Who were you talking to?" "My sister. She's having problems with her boyfriend again." Travis nodded, filing away another lie to add to his collection. Christina's sister lived in Portland and hadn't spoken to Christina in 2 years following a bitter argument about money. In Emma's room? I feel close to her in here. During the worst days at the hospital, I thought I might lose her. Being in her room helps me remember that she's okay. She is okay, Travis said, sitting beside Christina on Emma's bed. We're all okay. We're going to be fine. Christina leaned against him, and Travis forced himself not to recoil from her touch. I love you, she whispered. I know I haven't been myself lately, but I love you and Emma more than anything. I know, Travis said, stroking her hair. I love you too. The words felt like acid in his mouth, but they were necessary. Christina needed to believe she was safe right up until the moment she realized she wasn't. That night, Travis put the final elements of his plan into motion. He sent a text message to Chad from a burner phone, using information Stewart had gathered about McCarty's debt collection methods. Payment is overdue. Meet tomorrow night at the warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Come alone. Last warning. JM. Chad would recognize the initials as Jake McCarty, the loan shark who had been pressuring him for months. He would assume McCarty had finally lost patience and was calling in the debt. In his desperate state, Chad would see the meeting as either an opportunity to negotiate more time or a threat that required immediate action. Either way, Chad would come. Travis also arranged for Christina to receive a phone call from Dr. Mitchell the next evening, informing her that Emma's latest brain scans had revealed some concerning irregularities that required immediate discussion. Christina would rush to the hospital, where she would discover that Dr. Mitchell was attending a medical conference in Chicago and had never called her. By the time Christina realized she'd been manipulated, it would be too late. The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard was one of Travis's properties, purchased years earlier for a development project that had fallen through. It sat empty on 5 acres of industrial land, surrounded by other abandoned buildings and vacant lots. No neighbors, no witnesses, and no security cameras that Travis didn't control personally. Ron Shannon had spent 3 days preparing the location, ensuring that everything would proceed exactly as planned. The warehouse would provide privacy for what needed to be done, and the industrial crematorium that Travis owned through a subsidiary company would ensure that certain problems disappeared permanently. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the weather itself was conspiring to make Travis's work easier. He kissed Christina goodbye as she left for her fabricated medical emergency, watched Emma disappear into her room to do homework, and then drove to the warehouse to wait for Chad Sexton. Chad arrived at 8:47 p.m., driving a rental car he couldn't afford and wearing a desperation that Travis could smell from 50 yards away. He parked near the main entrance and approached the warehouse cautiously, clearly expecting trouble but too desperate to stay away. Travis stepped out of the shadows when Chad was halfway to the door. "Hello, Chad." Chad spun around, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and terror in rapid succession. "Travis? What are you? How did you?" "I know about you and Christina," Travis said simply. "I know about Emma. I know about everything." Chad's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but Travis was faster, producing a gun with the smooth efficiency of someone who had used firearms extensively during his construction work in rough neighborhoods. "I wouldn't," Travis said calmly. "We need to talk." "Look, Travis, I can explain. You can explain how you convinced my wife to help you assault my daughter? You can explain how you discussed murdering her in her hospital bed to cover your tracks? Please, I'm fascinated to hear your explanation." Chad's face went white as he realized how much Travis knew. "You're wearing a wire. This is a setup." "No wire. No setup. Just a conversation between 2 men about the attempted murder of a 16-year-old girl. It was an accident. Emma fell." "Emma didn't fall, Chad. You and Christina attacked her when she discovered your affair. Then you carried her downstairs and staged a scene to cover your crime. I have it all on video." The lie came easily, and Chad's reaction confirmed its effectiveness. He staggered backward, his face a mask of panic. That's impossible. There were no cameras. Emma installed a camera in her room. She was 16 years old. Chad. 16. And you helped assault her because she threatened your relationship with a married woman. Chad's desperate attempt to run ended before it began. Ron Shannon stepped out from behind Chad's rental car, blocking his escape route. Ron was 6'4" and built like the military demolitions expert he'd once been. Chad was a pilot who spent most of his time sitting in airplane cockpits. Inside, Travis said, gesturing toward the warehouse door, "We have a lot to discuss." The warehouse was empty except for a folding table, 2 chairs, and several items that Chad didn't want to examine too closely. Travis had learned about interrogation techniques during his years dealing with industrial espionage and labor disputes. Some lessons required more direct instruction than others. "Sit down," Travis ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Chad sat heavily in one of the chairs, his hands shaking as he stared at Travis. "What do you want?" "I want justice for my daughter. I want accountability for what you and Christina did to her. We can work something out. I'll disappear, move across the country. Christina will never see me again." "You'll disappear," Travis agreed. "But not the way you're thinking." Travis pulled out his phone and played one of the audio recordings Grant's team had captured. Chad's voice filled the warehouse. "Maybe we should have finished it at the hospital. Made it look like complications from her injuries." Chad closed his eyes as his own words condemned him. "You don't understand. I was desperate. Christina was going to leave me if Emma told you about us. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking about murdering a child to protect your affair. I never would have actually done it. It was just talk. You discussed suffocating my daughter to cause brain damage. That wasn't just talk, Chad. That was planning." Travis walked around the table, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. "Do you know what I've built, Chad? I started with nothing and created an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I did that by understanding that some problems require permanent solutions." "Travis, please. You made a mistake when you chose my family as your target. But your bigger mistake was thinking you could hurt my daughter and walk away from it." Travis nodded to Ron, who moved forward with the practiced efficiency of someone following a well-rehearsed plan. Chad's screams echoed through the warehouse for exactly 43 minutes before stopping permanently. Travis felt no satisfaction, no sense of closure or relief. He felt only the cold certainty that Emma was safe and that Chad Sexton would never threaten another family. Now it was Christina's turn. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Christina returned home from her fruitless trip to the hospital to find Travis sitting in his office, apparently working late on construction contracts. She knocked softly on the doorframe, her face a carefully composed mask of confusion and concern. "How's the paperwork?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk just as Emma had done so many times over the past weeks. "Tedious, but necessary," Travis replied without looking up. "How did things go at the hospital?" "That's the strange thing. When I got there, they said Dr. Mitchell was at a conference in Chicago. No one knew anything about abnormal brain scans or any need for Emma to come in." Travis frowned, finally meeting her eyes. "That's odd. Are you sure you heard the message correctly?" "I'm positive. The caller specifically said he was Dr. Mitchell and that Emma's scans showed irregularities that needed immediate attention. Must have been some kind of mix-up. Medical offices are notorious for communication problems." Christina nodded, but Travis could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was beginning to suspect that the call had been intentionally false, though she couldn't yet understand why anyone would want to lure her away from home. "Where's Emma?" Christina asked. "Asleep. She had a headache earlier and took some medicine. I should check on her." "I already did. She's fine." Christina settled back in her chair, and Travis resumed his performance of reviewing contracts while actually watching every micro-expression that crossed his wife's face. She was nervous, suspicious, but not yet truly afraid. "That would change shortly." "Christina," Travis said after several minutes of comfortable silence. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about taking that weekend trip to celebrate Emma's recovery. What about it? I think we should invite Chad Sexton to join us." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Christina's face went white, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles showed white through her skin. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Chad Sexton. Your boyfriend." The pilot you've been sleeping with for the past 18 months. I thought it would be nice to include him in our family celebration. Christina's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. Travis could actually see the moment her mind stopped processing and panic took over. Travis, I don't know what you're. Christina. Travis's voice was soft, almost gentle. We both know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is whether you're going to continue lying about it. Christina stared at him for a long moment, and Travis watched her mentally cycle through various strategies: denial, deflection, attack, confession. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. How long have you known? I've known everything since the night Emma was assaulted. Assaulted? Christina's voice cracked. Emma fell down the stairs. She was sleepwalking. Emma installed a camera in her room 3 weeks before her accident. She suspected you were having an affair and wanted evidence to confront you with. What she captured instead was documentation of conspiracy and attempted murder. Travis opened his desk drawer and withdrew a tablet, queuing up the video footage from Emma's room. He turned the screen toward Christina and pressed play. Christina watched herself enter Emma's room 18 months ago for one of her phone calls with Chad. Her face grew progressively paler as Travis fast-forwarded through weeks of documented adultery, lies, and planning sessions for her divorce. We weren't. Christina's words trailed off as she watched herself on screen, plotting Travis's financial destruction with her lover. Here's my favorite part, Travis said, advancing to the footage from the night of Emma's assault. Christina watched in horror as the camera captured her and Chad entering Emma's room, confronting their daughter, and the violent struggle that ended with Emma unconscious and bleeding. She watched Chad carry Emma's body out of frame while she gathered evidence and prepared their cover story. We didn't mean for that to happen, Christina whispered. Emma was going to ruin everything. Chad said she just needed to be scared, not hurt. Chad said a lot of things. He also said you should have suffocated Emma in her hospital bed to ensure she suffered permanent brain damage. Christina's head snapped up. That's not true. I would never. Travis played the audio recording of Chad's suggestion about using a pillow to cause brain damage, followed by Christina's weak protests and eventual capitulation to Chad's logic. You didn't say no, Christina. You said you couldn't do it yourself, which is very different from refusing to let it happen. Christina was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of what Travis had documented. Where did you get these recordings? I've been watching both of you for weeks. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment you thought you were safe. Travis, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you fell in love with a man who wanted to murder our daughter. How you helped him assault a 16-year-old girl to protect your affair. How you stood in that hospital room pretending to grieve while planning to take half of everything I've built. Christina's sobs grew harder, her whole body shaking with the force of her breakdown. I never meant for Emma to get hurt. I love her. I love both of you. You have an interesting way of showing love. Where is Chad? Christina asked suddenly, her tears stopping as a new fear took hold. He was supposed to call me hours ago. Chad won't be calling anyone anymore. The simple statement hit Christina like a physical blow. She stared at Travis with growing understanding and terror. What did you do? I solved a problem. Travis, what did you do to Chad? I ensured that he will never threaten my family again. Christina launched herself across the desk, her manicured nails aiming for Travis's eyes as maternal instinct and guilty desperation combined into pure fury. Travis caught her wrists easily, holding her at arm's length while she screamed and thrashed. You killed him. You murdered him. I protected my daughter from someone who wanted to suffocate her in her hospital bed. He wasn't serious about that. He was just scared and talking crazy. Were you scared too when you helped him carry Emma's unconscious body downstairs? Were you just talking crazy when you discussed how convenient it would be if she never woke up? Christina's fight went out of her all at once, leaving her collapsed across Travis's desk like a broken doll. What happens now? Now you make a choice. Travis released her wrists and leaned back in his chair, watching his wife of 16 years with the same detached analysis he applied to hostile business negotiations. Choice. You can confess to the police about what you and Chad did to Emma. Take responsibility for your crimes and accept whatever punishment the justice system decides. Emma will testify about what she remembers, and the audio recordings will support her testimony. Or you can disappear. Tonight. Permanently. Never contact Emma or me again. Never return to this state. And spend the rest of your life somewhere far away from the family you destroyed. Christina stared at him. You're giving me a chance to run? I'm giving you a chance to make the first unselfish decision you've made in 18 months. Emma believes her mother made a terrible mistake, but isn't fundamentally evil. If you disappear, she can keep believing that. If you force a trial, she'll have to testify about watching her mother help assault her. Which do you think is better for a 16-year-old girl who's already been through too much? If I run, everyone will assume I'm guilty. You are guilty, Christina. The question is whether you want Emma to have to relive your crimes in a courtroom. Christina was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands while Travis waited patiently. When she finally looked up, her face was streaked with tears but set with resignation. If I choose to leave, what guarantee do I have that you won't come after me later? You don't get guarantees. You get a head start and the knowledge that as long as you never contact my family again, I'll consider our business concluded. And if I try to come back? Travis smiled, and Christina flinched at the coldness in his expression. Then you'll join Chad, and Emma will have to live with being an orphan. Choose wisely. Christina nodded slowly. I need to pack some things. You have 30 minutes. Take only what you can carry in one suitcase. Leave your wedding ring, your credit cards, and anything else that connects you to this family. What about money? You should have thought about that before you chose to destroy your marriage for a man who wanted to murder your daughter. Travis watched Christina climb the stairs to their bedroom for the last time, listened to her moving around overhead, gathering the remnants of a life she'd thrown away for an affair that had cost her everything. 28 minutes later, Christina descended the stairs with a single suitcase and the hollow eyes of someone who had finally grasped the magnitude of her losses. I want to say goodbye to Emma. No. Travis, please. She's my daughter. She was your daughter. You forfeited that relationship when you chose Chad over her safety. Christina's face crumpled again, but she didn't argue. She understood that Travis held all the power now, and any attempt to negotiate would only make her situation worse. Will you tell her? Will you tell her that I'm sorry? I'll tell her that you made your choice. Christina nodded and walked toward the front door on unsteady legs. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the home she'd shared with Travis for 15 years. I did love you, she whispered. Both of you. Whatever else you believe, please know that I did love you. Love is what you do, not what you say, Travis replied. And what you did was choose to hurt the people who trusted you most. Christina walked out into the night, and Travis locked the door behind her. He would never see her again. Travis climbed the stairs to Emma's room and found her sitting on her bed, still dressed, and clearly awake despite his earlier claim that she was sleeping. Did you hear all of that? He asked. Most of it. Emma's voice was steady, but Travis could see the pain in her eyes. Is Chad really dead? Yes. And Mom? Gone. Forever. Emma nodded slowly, processing the end of the only life she'd ever known. Do you think she really loved us? Travis sat on the bed beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. I think she loved the idea of us. But when it came time to choose between her family and her selfish desires, we saw what mattered most to her. Will the police come asking questions? Probably. But Chad was in debt to dangerous people, and your mother's disappearance will look like a woman running away from scandal. Without bodies or evidence, there's nothing to investigate. Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, and Travis wrapped his arm around her. They sat in comfortable silence, two survivors of a war they'd never wanted to fight. What happens now? Emma asked. Now we heal. We rebuild. And we remember that family means protecting each other, no matter what it costs. Will we be okay? Travis looked around Emma's room, where hidden cameras had documented the destruction of their family and the evidence that had allowed him to exact justice for his daughter. We will be better than okay, he said. We will be free. Chapter 8. Loose Ends. 6 months after Christina's disappearance, Travis and Emma had settled into a new routine that bore little resemblance to their previous family life. They ate dinner together every night. Emma helped Travis review construction contracts while she did homework, and they developed an unspoken understanding that some topics were permanent closed to discussion. The police investigation into Chad Sexton's disappearance had proceeded exactly as Travis had anticipated. Chad's gambling debts and connections to organized crime figures provided ready-made suspects and motives that had nothing to do with suburban adultery. Jake McCarty, The loan shark Chad had owed money to, had been questioned extensively but released when his alibis proved ironclad. Alibis that Travis had helped ensure through careful manipulation of security footage and witness testimony. Christina's absence had been explained by a carefully crafted narrative of a woman overwhelmed by her daughter's recovery and the stress of her marriage. Travis played the role of the abandoned husband perfectly, expressing hurt and confusion about his wife's sudden departure while maintaining dignity in the face of obvious adultery rumors. The divorce papers had been filed by Nathaniel Roach citing abandonment and adultery, with Christina served through publication notices when she couldn't be located for personal service. The proceedings would conclude in another few months, leaving Travis with full custody of Emma and complete control of his assets. But Travis's sense of security was shattered on a Wednesday evening when Emma answered the phone while he was reviewing contracts in his office. "Dad." Emma called from the kitchen, her voice carrying an odd tension. "There's someone on the phone for you." She says she's Christina's sister. Travis felt ice water run through his veins. Christina's sister Latoya Valenzuela lived in Portland and hadn't spoken to Christina in over 2 years. Travis had counted on that estrangement to prevent uncomfortable questions about Christina's disappearance. He took the phone from Emma, noting the worry in his daughter's eyes. "This is Travis White." "Mr. White, this is Latoya Valenzuela, Christina's sister. I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been trying to reach Christina for weeks and can't get through to her. Her phone goes straight to voicemail, and she hasn't responded to any of my messages." Travis settled into performance mode, injecting his voice with the weariness of a man dealing with a painful situation. "I'm sorry, Latoya, but Christina and I are getting divorced. She left several months ago, and I haven't heard from her since." "Left? What do you mean she left?" "I mean she packed a bag one night and walked out. I found out later that she'd been having an affair." There was a long pause. "That doesn't sound like Christina. Whatever problems you two were having, she would never abandon Emma." Travis felt the first stirring of real concern. Latoya's voice carried conviction, not just curiosity. People do unexpected things when they're caught in lies. "Christina made her choice. Mr. White, my mother is dying. She's been asking for Christina for weeks. Whatever happened between you two, Christina would want to know about this. She would want to say goodbye." The ice water in Travis's veins turned to Arctic pressure. A dying mother was exactly the kind of situation that could force people to ask uncomfortable questions and demand unsatisfying answers. "I'm sorry to hear about your mother, but I honestly don't know how to reach Christina. When she left, she made it clear she wanted no contact with our family. I don't believe that. Christina might leave you, but she wouldn't cut off contact with Emma or abandon her family completely. Something else is going on here." Latoya's tone was shifting from concern to suspicion, and Travis recognized the danger. Christina's sister was going to keep digging, and determined family members had a way of attracting police attention when their questions weren't answered satisfactorily. "I understand this is difficult," Travis said carefully, "but I can only tell you what I know. Christina left, she hasn't been in contact, and I'm focusing on taking care of Emma during this difficult time. I'm going to keep looking for her, and if I find out that something happened to Christina..." The threat was implied but clear. Latoya suspected that Travis was lying about Christina's disappearance, and she wasn't going to let the matter drop. "I hope you find the answers you're looking for," Travis said. "If Christina contacts me, I'll let her know about your mother." Travis ended the call and immediately dialed Stuart Leach. The private investigator answered on the second ring. "I need everything you can find on Latoya Valenzuela in Portland, Oregon," Travis said without preamble. "Financial records, employment history, family connections, legal troubles, everything." "How urgent?" "Tonight. And Stuart, I need to know if she's been in contact with any law enforcement agencies about her sister's disappearance." "Understood. I'll have preliminary information within 4 hours." Travis's next call was to Ron Shannon. The security specialist was working a late shift at one of Travis's construction sites, supervising the installation of new alarm systems. "I may have a problem," Travis said when Ron answered. "Christina's sister is asking uncomfortable questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that might require permanent solutions." There was a pause. "Travis, we agreed that the Chad situation was a one-time thing. I'm not in the business of eliminating every person who might cause you problems. This isn't about convenience, Ron. This is about protecting Emma and maintaining the security we've built." What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to be prepared for the possibility that Christina's sister might become a threat to our family's safety. And you want me to handle that threat the same way I handled Chad, if necessary. Ron was quiet for a long moment. Travis, you're talking about killing a woman whose only crime is wanting to find her missing sister. That's not justice. That's paranoia. It's protection. It's murder, and it's exactly the kind of escalation that gets people caught. One disappearance can be explained. Two disappearances from the same family raises questions that won't go away. Travis felt his careful control beginning to fray. He'd eliminated the immediate threats to his family, but now he was facing the possibility of an endless series of complications and investigations. Every person who asked questions about Christina created new risks and new potential witnesses. What do you suggest? Travis asked. I suggest you find a way to make LaToya believe that Christina is alive and well somewhere far away. Manufacture some evidence of contact. Create a paper trail that supports your story. Make her disappearance look voluntary instead of suspicious. Travis considered the suggestion. It had merit, but it also required ongoing deception and maintenance. Every lie he created would need to be supported by additional lies, creating an increasingly complex web that could collapse if any single element failed. That might work, Travis said finally. But I need to know you'll be available if the situation requires more direct intervention. Travis, listen to me carefully. You've already crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. But if you keep crossing them, you're going to destroy yourself and Emma in the process. Sometimes the best way to protect your family is to stop creating new threats. Travis ended the call feeling more isolated than he had since Emma's assault. Ron was right about the risks of escalation, but he was wrong about the nature of the threat. People like LaToya didn't accept convenient explanations when family members disappeared. They asked questions, demanded answers, and involved authorities when those answers weren't satisfactory. Stewart's preliminary report arrived 3 hours later and confirmed Travis's worst fears. LaToya Valenzuela was a family law attorney with connections to law enforcement through her work on domestic violence cases. She'd already contacted the Portland Police Department about Christina's disappearance and had been advised to file a missing person report with the police in Travis's jurisdiction. More troubling, LaToya had been in contact with 3 other family members who were also concerned about Christina's sudden silence. Christina's disappearance wasn't just troubling one person. It was troubling an entire family network that included 2 lawyers, a social worker, and a retired police detective. Travis realized that his carefully constructed narrative about Christina's voluntary disappearance was about to face serious scrutiny from people with the skills and resources to investigate properly. The comfortable fiction he'd been living was about to collapse. That night, Travis sat in his office staring at intelligence reports and legal documents while Emma did homework at the other end of his desk. The routine that had become their new normal felt suddenly fragile, threatened by forces beyond his control. Dad, Emma looked up from her calculus textbook. Is everything okay? You seem worried. Travis considered his options. He could lie to Emma, try to shield her from the new complications that were developing. Or he could treat her as the intelligent young woman she was becoming and acknowledge that their situation was more precarious than it had appeared. Christina's sister called today, Travis said. She's asking questions about where Christina went. Emma set down her pencil and gave Travis her full attention. What kind of questions? The kind that might attract police attention. Emma absorbed this information with the same calm intelligence she'd shown throughout their ordeal. At 17, she'd already survived attempted murder and the destruction of her family. She was no longer a child who needed protection from difficult realities. What are our options? Emma asked. Travis smiled despite his concerns. Emma's use of "our" confirmed what he'd already known. They were partners in this situation, not a father protecting an innocent daughter. We can try to convince Christina's family that she's alive and well somewhere far away. Create false evidence of contact and hope they stop looking. Or we acknowledge that some problems require permanent solutions. Emma was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. How many people are we talking about? At least Christina's sister. Possibly others if the investigation expands. And if we don't stop them from looking, then eventually they'll involve police who won't accept convenient explanations. They'll want evidence, timelines, and proof that Christina left voluntarily. Emma nodded slowly. So we're talking about killing innocent people to protect ourselves from consequences of killing guilty people. We're talking about protecting our family from people who would destroy us to satisfy their curiosity. Is that what we've become, Dad? People who kill anyone who asks uncomfortable questions. Travis looked at his daughter, brilliant, strong, and far too young to be making these kinds of moral calculations. He thought about the man he'd been before Emma's assault, the principled businessman who believed in justice and consequences. That man seemed like a stranger now. I don't know, Travis said honestly, but I know I won't let anyone hurt you again, no matter what it costs. Emma reached across the desk and took her father's hand. Then we need to be smarter about this. Killing Christina's entire family isn't protecting me. It's guaranteeing that we'll eventually get caught. What do you suggest? We give them what they want. We prove that Christina is alive and well and chose to disappear. How? Emma smiled, and for a moment Travis saw the girl she'd been before their world collapsed. We're going to bring Christina back from the dead. Chapter 9, Resurrection. Emma's plan was brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Rather than trying to convince Christina's family that she had disappeared voluntarily, they would manufacture evidence that Christina was alive and well, living under a new identity in a location far from her old life. The key, Emma explained as they worked in Travis's office late into the night, is that we can't just create fake evidence. We need to create evidence that can be verified independently by people who know what they're doing. Travis watched his 17-year-old daughter outline a sophisticated identity theft and fraud scheme with the same methodical precision she applied to her calculus homework. Emma had inherited his strategic thinking abilities, but she'd also developed skills in areas he'd never imagined needing. Over the past 6 months, Emma had been learning about digital forensics, identity creation, and financial record manipulation through online courses she'd claimed were for a computer science elective. Travis now realized she'd been preparing for exactly this kind of situation, understanding that their security depended on more than just eliminating immediate threats. We start with a deceased woman whose identity can be appropriated safely, Emma continued, pulling up files on her laptop. Someone who died recently in a different state, preferably in an area with poor record-keeping or bureaucratic confusion. Emma had already identified their target, Margie Estrada, a 38-year-old woman who had died in a car accident in rural Nevada 3 weeks earlier. Margie had been single, estranged from her family, and employed as a freelance graphic designer who worked entirely online. Her death had been handled by a small-town funeral home with minimal digital records and no connections to larger database systems. We use Margie's social security number to establish bank accounts, rental agreements, and employment records for Christina, Emma explained. Then we create a digital trail showing that Christina has been living as Margie Estrada for the past 6 months. The plan required sophisticated forgery and digital manipulation, but Travis had resources that most people couldn't access. His construction empire included companies that specialized in document management, database maintenance, and records archiving. Getting access to the systems and expertise they needed wouldn't be difficult. More importantly, Emma's plan addressed the fundamental problem with their situation. It gave Christina's family something to find. Instead of trying to convince them to stop looking, they would provide evidence that would satisfy their concerns and end their investigation. The timeline has to be perfect, Emma warned. We need to show that Christina established her new identity before she disappeared from our lives, not after. That means backdating everything to look like she was planning this for months. Travis nodded, understanding the complexity of what they were attempting. What about verification? If LaToya hires investigators, they'll want to confirm that Christina is actually living this new life. That's the beautiful part, Emma said. We don't need Christina to actually be alive. We just need evidence that she was alive recently enough to explain why she hasn't contacted her family about her mother's illness. Emma's plan called for creating evidence that Margie Estrada had been traveling internationally for work, explaining why she wouldn't have been reachable by phone or email. They would establish a pattern of sporadic contact with employers and service providers, then create a plausible reason for her to be completely out of communication for several weeks. We make it look like she's on a freelance assignment in a remote location with limited internet access, Emma explained. Somewhere that would explain communication delays, but doesn't require us to actually produce her if someone comes looking. The plan was audacious, but Travis could see that it had a real chance of success. If they could convince Christina's family that she was alive and well, but temporarily unreachable, they might buy enough time for the investigation to lose momentum and fade away. Over the next 2 weeks, Travis and Emma worked with the focused intensity of people whose lives depended on perfect execution. Travis used his business connections to access records systems and document creation services, while Emma handled the digital forensics and identity establishment. They created rental agreements showing that Margie Estrada had leased an apartment in Phoenix 6 months earlier. Bank records showed regular deposits from freelance graphic design work, along with withdrawal patterns consistent with someone preparing for extended travel. Employment contracts documented assignments with companies that specialized in international marketing campaigns. The most challenging part was creating evidence of Christina's transition from her old life to her new identity. Emma solved this by manufacturing a series of encrypted email communications between Christina and identity theft services, showing that she had purchased false documents and social security numbers months before her disappearance. "It has to look like she was planning this for a long time," Emma explained. "Not like she made a sudden decision to run away after being caught in an affair." They planted digital evidence showing that Christina had been researching identity theft techniques for months, ostensibly as part of her plan to escape her marriage and start fresh. The timeline showed careful preparation rather than desperate improvisation, which would explain why her disappearance had been so complete. The breakthrough came when Stuart Leach reported that Latoya Valenzuela had indeed filed a missing person report with local police. The investigation was being handled by Detective Sean Hunt, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for thoroughness and persistence. "This is actually good news," Emma said when Travis shared the information. "It means we have a specific target for our evidence campaign. We need to make sure Detective Hunt finds exactly what we want him to find." Emma's plan called for releasing their manufactured evidence gradually, making it appear that the investigation was uncovering Christina's secret life rather than finding information that had been planted for them to discover. They started with anonymous tips to Detective Hunt's office, providing just enough information to point the investigation toward Christina's financial records and recent activities. The tips mentioned Margie Estrada as a possible alias and suggested that Christina might have been planning her disappearance for months. Detective Hunt proved to be exactly as thorough as his reputation suggested. Within days of receiving the anonymous tips, he had discovered the bank accounts, rental agreements, and employment records that Travis and Emma had created. More importantly, he found them through his own investigative work rather than having them handed to him, which made the evidence more credible. The detective's report to Latoya was everything Travis and Emma had hoped for. Christina appeared to have been planning her disappearance for months, possibly as part of an elaborate identity theft scheme. She had established a new life under an assumed name and had been working to completely erase her previous identity. "The evidence suggests that your sister was involved in sophisticated identity fraud," Detective Hunt explained to Latoya during a phone call that Travis had arranged to have monitored. "She appears to have assumed the identity of a deceased woman and has been living under that name for several months. But why hasn't she contacted our family about our mother's illness? According to the employment records I've found, she's been working on international assignments that require extended periods in remote locations. It's possible she doesn't know about your mother's condition." Detective Hunt's investigation had found exactly what Travis and Emma wanted him to find: a woman who had carefully planned her disappearance and was currently unreachable due to work obligations. The timeline explained her absence, her new identity explained her silence, and her apparent criminal activity provided a reason why she might not want to be found. More importantly, the investigation provided Latoya with closure. Her sister wasn't dead or being held against her will. She was alive, but living a completely different life under an assumed identity. Christina had chosen to cut ties with her old life so completely that even family emergencies couldn't reach her. "I understand this isn't the resolution you were hoping for," Detective Hunt told Latoya. "But the evidence strongly suggests that your sister planned this disappearance and is living somewhere under false identification. Unless she commits a crime that brings her to law enforcement attention, there's no legal basis for continuing the investigation." The official closing of the missing person case was reported to Travis 3 days later. Detective Hunt had concluded that Christina White had voluntarily disappeared and was likely living under the assumed identity of Margie Estrada. No crime had been committed beyond identity theft, and since the victim of that theft was deceased, there was no complainant to pursue charges. Latoya Valenzuela made one final attempt to locate her sister, hiring a private investigator to follow up on Detective Hunt's findings. But the investigator reached the same conclusion. Christina had carefully planned her disappearance and was currently unreachable due to work assignments in remote international locations. 6 weeks after Latoya's first phone call, she sent a final message to Travis through her attorney. She was satisfied that Christina was alive and well, but had chosen to completely sever ties with her old life. While she didn't approve of Christina's methods, she respected her right to make that choice and wouldn't pursue the matter further. Travis and Emma celebrated quietly in his office, sharing takeout Chinese food and reviewing the files they would need to maintain indefinitely to support their constructed narrative. "How long do we need to keep this up?" Emma asked, twirling lo mein noodles around her chopsticks. "Forever," Travis said. Margie Estrada needs to remain alive and active for the rest of what would have been Christina's natural lifespan. If she ever officially dies or disappears, someone might start asking questions about why Christina never resurfaces. Emma nodded, understanding the long-term commitment they were making. "So we become identity managers for a dead woman. We become whatever we need to be to protect our family." Travis looked at his daughter, no longer the innocent girl who had discovered a camera in her room to catch her mother's adultery. Emma had become his partner in creating and maintaining the elaborate fiction that protected them both from the consequences of their justice. They had eliminated the people who hurt their family, manufactured evidence to satisfy those who came looking for answers, and created a sustainable long-term strategy for maintaining their security. They had won completely and permanently. But as Travis watched Emma review digital files and discuss maintaining false identities with the casual competence of a professional criminal, he wondered what they had lost in the process of winning. Emma would never again be just his daughter. She would always be his accomplice. They would never again be just a family. They would always be conspirators bound together by shared secrets and mutual protection. The price of justice had been their innocence, and the price of security had been their peace. But Emma was alive, their family was safe, and the people who had betrayed them would never threaten anyone again. Travis White had built his empire by understanding that some victories required sacrifices that couldn't be calculated in dollars and cents. He had protected his daughter by sacrificing the father he used to be and the family they might have remained. But as Emma smiled at him across their takeout containers, her eyes bright with intelligence and determination, Travis knew he would make the same choices again. Some things were worth any price, and family was worth everything. Justice had been served. The family had been protected. The future was secure. And Travis White would never forgive or forget the lesson that protecting the people you love sometimes requires becoming someone you never imagined you could be. Epilogue. 5 years later, Travis White stood in his office reviewing architectural plans for a children's hospital that would bear Emma's name. The White Foundation for Child Safety had become one of the region's most prominent charitable organizations, providing protection and support for children in dangerous family situations. Emma, now 22 and a senior at Stanford studying criminal justice and psychology, served on the foundation's board of directors. She planned to pursue a career in law enforcement, specializing in crimes against children. Her experience with family betrayal and violence had given her insights into predatory behavior that would serve her well in protecting other families. The official story was that Emma's dedication to child safety had been inspired by her own accident and recovery. The unofficial reality was that Emma White had learned at 17 that some people forfeit their right to exist when they prey on children, and she intended to spend her career ensuring that such people faced appropriate consequences. Christina White remained legally missing, though Margie Estrada continued to live her carefully constructed life in digital records and financial databases. Every few months, Travis or Emma would create evidence of Margie's continued existence. A utility payment here, a freelance contract there, maintaining the fiction that kept Christina's disappearance from attracting renewed attention. Chad Sexton's disappearance had been officially attributed to his gambling debts and criminal associates. Jake McCarty had eventually been arrested for an unrelated murder, providing convenient closure to Chad's case. No one looked for Chad anymore, because everyone understood what happened to people who defaulted on debts to organized crime figures. Travis had never remarried, claiming that Christina's betrayal had destroyed his faith in romantic relationships. The truth was simpler. He had found the perfect partner in Emma, someone who understood him completely and shared his commitment to protecting their family above all other considerations. They had dinner together every night, discussing everything from foundation business to construction projects to the best methods for maintaining false identities in an increasingly digital world. They were closer than most fathers and daughters because they shared secrets that no one else could understand. On quiet evenings, Travis would sometimes wonder what their lives might have looked like if Christina and Chad had never betrayed their family. But those thoughts never lasted long. The people they had become, stronger, wiser, and absolutely committed to each other, were better than the people they might have remained. Emma's childhood had ended the night she was assaulted for discovering her mother's adultery. Travis's innocence had ended the night he watched security footage of his wife and her lover discussing the murder of his daughter. But what they had built from the ashes of their betrayed trust was something more powerful than either innocence or childhood. A partnership based on absolute loyalty and shared understanding that family was worth any sacrifice. The White family had been destroyed by betrayal and reborn in justice. Travis and Emma had learned that love was what you did, not what you said, and what they did was protect each other without limit or compromise. Some stories ended with forgiveness and redemption. This story ended with consequences and survival. Travis White had never forgiven the people who hurt his daughter, and he never would. He had ensured that they faced justice proportional to their crimes, and he would ensure that the family he and Emma had rebuilt would never again be vulnerable to such betrayal. Justice had been served. The family had been protected. The future was secure. And in the end, that was enough.